Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Face Off. I am so excited to have you sharing with me on tonight. I am Reverend D. Marie, and I am your host for this evening. This evening Face Off is brought to you by Face to Face Ministries in partnership with the York Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, as well as Restoration Community Christian Church. Each face off is an opportunity for us to bring you an up close example of someone's lived experience, a story of resiliency and hope that can empower us as a community to continue to move forward in spite of what we may be facing. Tonight, we will be joined by Mr. Shareef Hameed, and we will be talking about childhood abuse prevention. This is a deep topic tonight, but I am so excited to have Mr. Shareef with us. And so it is time for us to take the mask off and invite Brother Shareef into the room. Hello.
Hey, peace, Queen. How you doing?
I'm good. Shareef, how are you?
Hanging in there. That's all we can do. Do the best we can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I am familiar with you, Shareef, but there may be some people who are joining us tonight who are not. And so I just want to start off tonight by giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself in whatever way you see fit.
Oh, okay. Nothing fancy. Brother Shareef. Try to be active in our community to make a difference in our community. One way I do that, I have the Our Power TV show, which airs every Wednesday at 8 o'clock on Channel 16 and on my Facebook page. Been doing that for about 7 years now.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I by trade or by job, whatever you want to call it, I'm a therapist and a child counselor, but mostly I do mental therapy with children and families in their home. Um, I do that. I have two. I'm a father of two proud boys, one 16 and 17. They live in North Carolina, and my youngest boy, he's supposed to be a sophomore in high school, but he's a sophomore in college. So
Oh, wow.
proud of him for that. My older son could have done the same thing, but he had some hiccups in the road trying to impress people. But
Hmm.
past that, um, other than that, he does. Both of them do well, and that's my life. Everything I do, for them, other than God.
Okay. Well, Sharif, this is not your first time on the face off. And so I want, I'm starting there because I have never had a repeat guest. So
Right.
I have sat down and engaged people for the first time for about 2 years now. And so we are now coming back together again. And so I think it's very important for us to start by helping those that are watching understand how we ended up doing another face off because we did the first face off. And if I remember correctly, it was about Black August, totally different perspective, much more economic related, Black community related. But tonight, we are going to delve more into a very sensitive mental health topic and just a topic in general that's impacting communities.
Yes, indeed. I don't know how you wanted to start, but yes, that's a very sensitive topic, and I just want people, whoever's listening, to just think and just be aware. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah, thank you for give it. It is we're definitely putting out a trigger warning. For people that I've talked to, I've explained. It's called Face Off for a reason. We are telling our truth. It's a real lived experience, and so it's an opportunity for us to share. And so I want to start tonight, Sharif, by asking you why now. Even before we get into the what, why now?
it's long overdue for my mental health, and it's
Hmm.
something talking about child sexual abuse. You're hearing me right, brother. Sharif is not Superman. You know,
Hmm.
look a certain way or give off a certain aura. But I'm human just like everyone else. But I've been holding on to this for way too long. And when we were at Skillets to Plate, uh,
Hmm.
we had I always knew that you worked with mental health and in the family, but I didn't know it was as it was kind of a reminder for me because you don't remember everything about it.
Hmm.
And just kind of out of nowhere. If you remember, I just started spilling the beans, as they say,
Yeah.
with their sign that I was holding on to it and I needed someone to vent to. With me being a therapist, I'm always listening to other people's problems, concerns, and whatever. They're very
Mhm.
rare and listen to mine. Like I said, I'm
Yeah.
like anybody else, man. You know,
Absolutely.
so it was.
Yeah. It was definitely candid. I don't think either one of us expected us to delve into the type of conversation that we did, but I'm happy that we did.
Mm,
Um, and so I know it's a very sensitive subject, but there's no better way to tell your story than to just give you space to share your story.
mm,
Um, so start wherever you would like to start in your journey,
yes.
and we'll go from there.
Anyone that's on social media should know that child sexual abuse through the roof. It seems like every week or once or twice a week, I read the York Dispatch. You know, they put you know, pictures of people up there, and it's always something. Not always, but it's a lot about sexual abuse, rape,
Hmm.
and that kind of triggered me too, because this is just it's way out of hand. But I was a victim of child sexual abuse. Uh, like I was explaining to you, a lot maybe if people don't remember or they do remember, back in the late '70s and the '80s, there were no daycares. You went to your aunt's house, mom's friend's house, someone like that, and that's where I used to go. I went to a lady, I won't say her name, but she was very well known for watching children in the neighborhood. She basically turned her home into a daycare. So how it started off, when my mom and dad used to gamble and travel a lot. They would go to Atlantic City and places like that where I couldn't go. So they didn't want me home by myself. So if it was too crowded at my babysitter's house, my next door neighbor's daughter would watch me. I
Hmm.
mean, literally my next door neighbor, and she had to be 18 or 19 at that time, and I probably was in about the third grade, which I was means I was about 7 or 8, and it gradually started there, and then it turned into a full blown, I don't encounter, because I don't call that sex. Of course, she didn't hold me down, but she would manipulate me. She already had authority over me because my mom and dad trusted her to watch me. And, when you're a child, you don't want to get in trouble with your parents, meaning one tool she would use, I'm going to tell your dad that you was acting up if you don't go along with the show. You know what I mean? I was like, huh, I don't want that. Everyone know my dad was off the hook. He was a man's man. He was very disciplinarian, and if I was acting up anywhere, he would get with me. Not abuse, but he made his presence, known about discipline. So that's one way that she would manipulate me. Plus, she was much older than me. 18, 19 with a 8 or 9 year old. And every time I went there, especially since she was just right next door. Her mom would be downstairs, sleep, not paying attention. She was elderly. Her mom was, and she basically just manipulated me into that. As soon as I would go there, she would be like, "I'm getting ready to get in the shower. You know what it is when I get out." And I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." And I mean, it was bad, and she had a cousin that was more my age from Philly, and she would come down and visit. Um, I mean, this is kind of vulgar language, or not cursing, but are you okay with that?
Be yourself. This
Yeah.
is your story. Tell it in your truth.
So she had a cousin that would come down here to York from Philly, and she was more my age. She may have been 1 or 2 years younger than me, which means she was like maybe 6 or 7 or 8, and she had all three of us in a threesome every time, and which tells me that either that girl was abused by someone in Philly or abused by her, and because she knew what the drill was.
Absolutely.
Let's
Absolutely.
and my heart was beat. I was an altar boy at Catholic school, and
Hmm.
I told you before that um, I was so shook up by all these encounters, I didn't know where to turn.
Yeah.
I want to tell my mom and dad because they would have went off. I was scared to tell the Catholic school because they always
Mhm.
talking about going to hell. So, a few of my friends from across town, I told them, and I didn't get the kind of response that I wanted. They glorified it. Oh, my
Yeah.
name Eric then. Oh, you smashing an old head? Yo, man, you off the hook. I'm like, man, she's much older than me. They was like, yeah, man, yeah, you getting it in, man. So I said, I'm not confiding in them no more.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm tussling with two sides, especially with me going to Catholic school. I was literally an altar boy at
Mm-hmm.
Catholic school. And they were so dogmatic. Always
Mm-hmm.
talking about going to hell and all that. I was like, man, I'm not telling them. Plus I didn't want to get her in trouble. I just ain't like how she was taking advantage of me.
Yeah.
And it then from there, the babysitter that I was talking about, am I talking too much?
No, listen, you're fine.
Okay,
You're
let me
fine.
know if you need to interject. But
Nope, I'll interject when I need to.
my babysitter from across town, once again, she was very elderly, even though she had a lot of children there. She would give us cereal or peanut butter and jelly. We had plenty of toys there. We kind of just was watching ourselves. But she had a son that was at least 19 or 20, at the
Mhm.
least. And I would see him have sexual relations with his younger cousins that
Mm,
were, yeah. And the strange thing is, I don't know what kind of freaky stuff he was into. He always wanted me to watch, but he would
mhm,
never put his hands on me. And I think my dad saved me because, like I said, my dad was a man's man. He was part of the Nation of Islam, and they didn't play back in those days.
mhm.
My dad would have knew that was going on. He would have returned him to the essence
Mm,
with no second thought. So I think that's what saved him. But still, the mental part, he didn't make me physically, but
yeah.
that's manipulation. He would always want me to watch. He would say, "Eric, come, check this out, this, and that," every time. And I was over there more than I was at my neighbor's house.
Hmm. Shareef, let me. I want to slow us down because you've shared a lot, and so first off, thank you for being open and vulnerable with your truth, because it is a lot. So far, you've already raised up a lot of what we hear in our community, which is this need to depend on a social support system to assist in caring for our children, right? That is something that is very popular within our community. And it's not something that we want to go away, but you are raising our awareness of the vulnerability that some of our children are placed in when we are entrusting them to family friends and community friends and people like that. And so I think this is important to raise up because even in my work we do the same work. A
Mhm.
large part of the narratives that I hear are very similar to yours. A large part of the narratives that children share are not because of strangers, but being victimized by family friends or relatives or people who have been entrusted into the family circle, right? So it's important for people tonight to hear this and to kind of sit in this tension of being comfortable with asking the question and doing the due diligence to vet everybody that's engaging our children.
Mhm.
Everybody. Nobody is exempt. You've talked about several different experiences, but I want to go back a little bit to the experience that you mentioned regarding the young lady from Philadelphia and you seeking help, because the first time you sought help was from friends and you weren't given wise counsel.
Right.
um, I want to go back to that a little bit. Just shed some light for us on what that space was like for you, having to hold on to this, because it seems like there was a wrestling. There's a sense of something is wrong, but not knowing how to get help, which is a very familiar story that we hear. What was that period like for you? Do you recall any behavioral changes in you? Do you recall anything that was different at school, at home? Were you giving out signals?
I don't think I was giving any outward signals. I've always been private and to myself, and soft, so to speak. So I don't think I gave any signs. The pain and the confusion was up here and here.
Hmm.
You um, to the point of, even though I didn't agree with it and I didn't understand it, because I got my closest, some of my friends, giving me a pat on the back like I'm some kind of
Hmm.
hero. I didn't know, I didn't know what to think. And then, um, like I said, I saw that plenty of times at the daycare, that I went to. And then one of the victims, a young girl who was the victim, which was his cousin, then she would expect that from me.
Hmm.
And we started having jousting sessions, as you want to, whatever you want to call it. And
Hmm.
she's about maybe a year or two younger than me. But the outward signs that you asked that affect me, no, but it definitely affected her. One minute she wanted to be with a woman, next minute she wanted to be with a man. She started abusing drugs, messing with older men, and she got pregnant at an early age, incarceration. And I would ask her,
Hmm.
like, so and so, what's wrong with you? And she said, you know what happened to me. That's what
Hmm.
she saying. This is when we were a little older.
Hmm.
So but to go back to your question, I don't think I showed anything outwardly other than having my head down a lot. But that sick behavior started to spread, and
Hmm.
ain't the most popular thing, but I know for a fact this goes on in the Black and Latino community. Meaning, I had a cousin, and meaning my mom and her mom were sisters. So
Hmm.
I would go to her house, and we were supposed to watch her younger brother. We would make sure he's tucked away, and she started making advances, but I was already sexually experienced, if you want to call it that. I don't call that
Hmm.
sex because it's not something that I brought on, but
Hmm.
she approached me with that, and I went right along with it. But I'm still only like 10 or 11. You know,
Hmm.
someone be like, "Ew, your cousin, man, don't get brand new." We got people
Hmm.
today going with their cousins, having sexual experiences with their cousins, and even in relationships with
Yeah.
in the Black and brown community. It's going on as we speak.
And let's put this in context. We're talking about 10, 11-year old you, right? And so I tell my families now, even in the work that I do, you can't unring a bell, right? And sometimes when adults have an awareness of what's happening, there's an immediate attempt to press the pause button. But when it comes to an introduction to sexuality at such an early age, you can't unring a bell, right? Like when you talk about human development, there's a certain point where you are supposed to developmentally grow in this way and be interested in these ways. But when those things are turned on early, you are not able to make wise and constructive choices. You're
Right.
making choices based off of this chemical reaction that is naturally happening. So yeah, this is a judgment free space. This is your truth, your lived experience. There is no wrong in it. It is what you've lived through, and we're grateful that you're here today to share it, because as you've said, there is somebody who is going through this right now. I promise you. I know, and you know, and people may be watching us and not assuming, but we see this in the work that we do. Children are having these lived experiences right now,
hmm
and it is precisely why we're having this
But
conversation.
a little more force involved too.
Yes, absolutely.
Someone forced me because of who the perpetrators were, them being female, but they manipulated me. There's no way
Mhm.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, or 16-year-old should be making sexual decisions. They're not
Yeah.
not mature enough, not
Mm.
unless someone's going to take them on as a wife or a husband. I don't know if that still goes on. Arranged marriage,
Yeah.
they do that at a pretty early age, and it's a science behind that. But there's no way someone under 17, in my estimation, should be making sexual decisions. They're not mature enough, and certainly not no 8 or 9 year old. You know,
Absolutely.
one is almost 20. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that learned behavior, as you want to say, then that led into that with a family member. I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm not ashamed to say it because
Hmm.
it's a reality, and it's not really something that I wanted. But I that's the outward way I would say to answer your question that
Yeah.
it affected me. Mhm.
So, Shareef, there is a lot of stigma in the Black and Brown community about sexual abuse and mental health. Like, these are two categories where we don't give enough attention to. And so, I speak from my context, you speak from your context. I was raised in the church. I've
Mhm.
heard stories about sexual abuse. I've counseled people regarding the topic, but yet it is still very much a stigma and something that we sweep under the rug as if it's not happening. So, for you and your own personal healing journey, here you are today, you're talking about it. How have you allowed these experiences to kind of shape and form you in the work that you do? Because you're engaging children who are having these lived experiences every day.
Mhm. Just trying to help them get through it if they in fact experience that, which I've heard it before. That's why we have the ACE study and survey before
Hmm.
we can a client until we do that ACE study and survey. And ACE
Hmm.
stands for First Childhood Experiences, and it's a list
Hmm.
of 10 questions, and 3 or 4 of those questions is about sexual abuse, molestation. Have you experienced that? So helping to relieve someone else's pain kind of relieve my own pain because I never
Hmm.
it's my first time going public with this, but I really haven't shared this with so many people. And every one I did, they were shocked. They think I'm some
Absolutely.
man or something. They think men, it's almost like a badge of honor. That really confused me. You know,
Hmm.
my friends, but they weren't mature enough to counsel me. I just wanted someone to be like, hey, she shouldn't have did that, or something. I don't need no badge of honor, for that. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it was very confusing because I heard them, and anyone likes a compliment, you know what I mean. But I didn't want that kind of compliment with that. So I was very confused, so much to the point. So I was just a child then. My teenage years, my mom and dad, not because they knew anything, used to coddle me, meaning I
Mm.
was very spoiled. They wouldn't let me go but so far except for the neighborhood playground while my friends were ripping and running, going to different parties and having girlfriends and even getting them pregnant at an early age. I
Mm.
wasn't I wasn't doing that. So many people would think with that quote unquote sexual experience you had with, grown women and, stuff like that, you would think that it would carry over. But I couldn't carry it over at that time if I wanted
Mm.
to, because my mom and dad, they had a kind of a rough upbringing, especially my mom.
Mhm.
She was raised in North Philly. She used to have to fight all the time. She was light skinned, pretty hair. She was a pretty lady. She used to always have to fight. So she came here later. So what I'm saying is, I really thank her for sending me to Catholic school for the education and the discipline. I learned a lot. But that since I never got any real counseling or therapy for that, it's like it in a way came back once
Mhm.
mom and dad divorced. A lot of people go stay with their mom when their parents split up. I wouldn't stay
Mhm.
with dad, and then
Mm.
um, um, I was always attracted to older women uh,
Mhm.
because I was so mature for my age. I was talking about political things and, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And young girls ain't want to hear that. So I wasn't popular amongst the young girls. So if I would bump into an older lady, she was like, you're mature for your age. You sure you just 17 or 18? I had a little facial hair too. I said, yeah, these girls are silly around here. So Um, I someone would call that bad because I never had a bad experience after that.
Mhm.
Enough wasn't enough either, and I was attracted to older women. Mm.
You mentioned something, and I don't want us to skip over it. You said, "I couldn't have kept that up even if I wanted to," and
Right.
you talked about your parents and their support in helping you, but that also leads me into thinking about another stigma that exists. Typically, when people are the victims of childhood sexual abuse, they are then labeled as fast or over sexualized. Like there's a whole different set of stigma that comes from you being a victim, right?
Hmm.
And so you are saying that you were people didn't know, so you were protected from that. But when we think about our culture and when we hear something about a kid, and I'll say a girl, you hear a young girl was sexually assaulted, then every body movement that she makes is then over sexualized. It is deemed as something super inappropriate. But here you are, a grown man, illuminating that part of your experience did navigate how you function in the world from that moment on. You had an attraction to older women. You weren't, you didn't have a proclivity to people your ages for various reasons. And so, from my perspective, from a therapeutic perspective, that's how it's playing out for you. Whereas for females, it may look a little different.
Hmm.
Right. And so, even in how we talk about the residual of these experiences can come with a different type of stigma.
Right. Definitely. Like I said, I was baby and coddled by my parents, so I couldn't rip and run the street. I had to stay in. It wasn't until my mom and dad got a divorce I wouldn't, stay with my dad. Um, I was a daddy's boy. My dad was like, "Don't be getting in no trouble." You know what I mean? You do what you need to do. And I had the apartment to myself. My dad
Mm,
would be here for days and weeks at a time, and he would only come back to make sure I had food in the house, checking with me. We really didn't have cell phones back then, but that's
mhm,
what he would do. He would come like on a Monday before he went to work. He was like, "You good?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm good." It was a little uh odd, a little bit just being in an apartment by myself, but I took advantage of that, so to speak.
mhm.
The old me, so it wasn't me. That was brought out of me, some demonic spirit. But yeah, that's how it was. And
Yeah.
I think from having those negative experiences, it kind of shaped me once I had, more freedom. And that's another thing in the black community. A lot of uncles and, you know, um, community uncles, so to speak,
Mm,
you know, they don't have a good, not all of them, but most of them ain't have a good outlet on sexuality. They used to
mhm,
get as much as you can, you know,
mhm.
you know, yeah, you was with her, yo, do your thing, boy. I
Yeah.
mean, kind of stuff. Bad advice, man. They weren't
Mm,
trying to hurt you, but in the way, they were. They should have been telling me what your grades look like, you know.
mhm.
And surprisingly, it didn't affect me in school. I still got good grades. It just something was not right on the inside of me because I wasn't born that way. I
Yeah.
was baited into that, and then I just picked up, a bad habits when it came to that.
We say in this field, hurt people. And, once you've gone down the road, it's easier to keep going down that road. And you did raise up an important point, which is the community's language around human development and sexuality, right? Because you've talked about your experience and what people said to you in your generation. And I know that I've heard some of the same things in my generation. And I know as a clinician talking to kids now, I'm hearing some of the same rhetoric. And so as a people, we have to pay attention to how we are validating, in
Mm,
some instances, this evil that we want to work so hard to eradicate.
mm,
Um, and we've got to hold ourselves accountable as adults, because when we do say, a attaboy or atta girl, that's validating this cycle that we're trying to stop. So that's very important that you raise that question. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, as a person, as a mother, more than a professional, as a mom, I don't trust anybody. I've been doing this work too long to see too many perpetrators that are right front and center with families to trust anybody when it comes to sexuality and temptation and all of the other words we can use when it comes to children. And notice I didn't say to my daughters, to my son, I'm saying to children, because no one is exempt. No one is exempt from experiencing childhood sexual abuse, as you've pointed that out, because typically, Shareef, when we hear these conversations, they're often coming through the lens of a woman. Like, let's be honest, like, typically, these conversations are centered around females. But here you are talking about a lived experience, which, again, thank you for trusting us with this. Here you are talking about a lived experience that I know some of our other Black young men are going through.
Hmm. You
It's
got
just not being packaged as something that's inappropriate, which is what you've hit on.
got women or mothers pimping out their own sons to their friends and other people in the community. They think that's cute. And again, if I had the time, another thing that I experienced that just kind of threw me off. I was friends with a young man in the community. At that time, he was around 13. I might have been 9 or 10, and I would go to his house and watch, basketball stuff like that. Um, to be straight up with you, my mom was dating her dad, and then one time she brought her sister, which is my aunt. That's right, I'm calling you out, but I ain't gonna say your name because it was disgusting. My aunt start going with my friend. He was 13, and she was
Mm,
her 30s at that time.
mhm,
And
mhm.
um she was just coming by too much, and I was like, "Yo, man, what's going on?" And he was proud of it. He was
Mhm.
"Yeah, we be getting it in." I was like, "Man, my aunt had to be every bit of 30 some years old." So just being exposed to that just confused me more. I was like, maybe it wasn't so bad what I was doing with the neighbor, but I'm like, 13, he's still a child. So I ain't afraid to admit it. It's the truth. And
Yeah,
it's so much of that, going on. And most of the young men, they don't see themselves as a victim because it's
yeah.
so badge of honor. I
The
had
language, yeah, the language that we use normalizes it. And Shareef, there's a system of silence that you're raising up because you're talking about you having your experience and having to be silent about it. And then you see your aunt have this second experience with a friend. And so now that's validating something that you were trying to, that you were wrestling with, because there's the silence that goes along with it. And sometimes silence, not sometimes, most of the time, silence turns into consent. And
Mhm,
it's not. It's not. Let me make that very clear. But in many cases, that's how this is being internalized.
mhm,
It's being internalized. Okay, you're not saying anything about it and you're doing it, which means it's okay that it's happening to me. This is why we've got to break the silent cycle and talk about it.
mhm,
This is why we've got to talk about it. And that's why we're here, because it's happening in our community. We're not talking about it because this is a one off. We're talking about it because not only does this damage you individually as a person, but when you think about the cultural component and the family component, like, families are being torn apart, not just in, the relationship, but just the whole value of family is being broken down because of these types of actions.
mhm.
So again, thank you, Shareef. I have a question for you. If you could go back, knowing all that you know now, like, how should the community have responded to you? So when you went to seek some help, what is the proper response?
Well, um, religion or religious institutions got to be stop being so dogmatic and meet
Mhm,
people where they are, because that's the first place I was gonna go. They call it
mhm,
confession. You know,
mhm,
I don't believe. And that, I mean, now me as an adult, I mean, I confess my sins to God, but not to no another man. But they're so dogmatic. They couldn't.
Mhm.
They would. I felt as though they wouldn't meet me where I was, else I would have told them. You know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I can't really blame the young men that I shared it with because they were children themselves. Children ain't
Right.
capable of doing no counseling. But, you know, if someone does share something with you, if you can't handle it, you know, go to a trusted uncle, aunt, you know, or parents. You know, I would have been open if they would have been like, oh, I don't know, man, but let me see what my mom thinks, you know, or something.
Mhm.
And we just have to be more aware to even prevent these things from happening with our children. You just don't turn your children, like you said, over, you know, to anyone. Check everyone. Everyone
Mhm.
deserves to be checked. The coach, the football coach, the basketball coach, the baseball coach,
Mhm.
science teacher, English teacher, whatever. You don't let no adults be in the company of your children without you making your presence known. You know,
Mhm.
like I said, I think my dad saved me from that second incident just because of his presence, and he didn't even know anything, but he
Yeah.
had an aura about him that kind of struck fear in some people. You know, especially who he was, you know, associated with, because I think that guy just sick someone, and I think if he thought he could get away with it, he would have did something to me. But my dad unknowingly saved me. I
Yeah.
thank to the end of time for that. Mhm. Got to
Yeah.
know children is with and question everyone.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And from a so you talked about faith communities, you talked about schools. Thinking about this from a mental health perspective, because like you said, it's happening. And so this is us doing the work and trying to raise awareness. But for the people who are watching who have children and nieces and cousins and just little people, how would you start the conversation? Like, how do you show curiosity with children around this conversation?
You mean if I was doing therapy with them?
Yeah, if you were doing therapy or just talking to a random person in the community, like how do you raise this topic right now if you don't know that it's happening?
Well, my job and your job kind of breaks the ice because I always tell them I don't know anything about you, but I have to give this assessment, which is the ACE
Mhm.
survey. I implore. I don't know if your audience is can comment or whatever.
Yeah, they can comment.
Yeah, the ACE study and survey, adverse childhood experiences, three or four of those questions is revolved around sexual abuse. It's so invasive that they took it away for a while because the
Mhm.
question was so invasive, but then they seen a rise in this, so
Mhm.
they brought it back. So that kind of breaks the ice, and I would tell them, you know, if something like this happened to you, it's not your fault. And then I could be a little more direct if we're out, you know, in the street,
Yeah.
especially if I'm talking to a male, because it just it's bad either way, but it just hits different with with a male. I think it's worse. And someone saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, you can't say that." It's worse because men are less likely to open up, which means they're
Mhm.
going to hold that in like I did. Luckily, you know, I had some wise people, you know, around me coming up to help calm my nerves and, you know, taper my anger and frustration. But imagine holding that in, especially if a male was
Mhm.
violated by another male. That
Mhm.
degrading thing. Not that I
Mhm.
experienced it, but I'm just saying that is the most degrading thing that could happen to a young man is being violated by another man. How do we know? One of his comedy sessions, it was around 78 or 79. Richard Pryor admitted that he was sexually abused by another man, and you
Mhm.
his aura change, even though he was trying to add humor. I don't know how you get humor out of that, but you know, he
Mhm.
was very vulgar, and he was like, yeah, the men used to chase me down in the alley and sexually abuse,
Mhm.
and we know he wasn't right, you know. And it's
Mhm.
so many people. Tyler Perry, the one guy, he's a real big guy. He used to uh, play the role of Zeus or something. I forget his name, but he admitted that he was sexually abused by males, and Tyler Perry by his aunts. Once again, mom pimping you out to aunts, and it just
Mhm.
different, with men, especially if that factor is there being violated by another man. Um, the anger and the frustration is unreal.
Yeah, I professionally speaking, the impacts definitely are different for different people. However, they are equally traumatic in the rippling effect
I
that
think
they have in people's lives.
that
Yeah. But you speak from the lens of being a man, so I totally understand, your perspective on that. And I'm sure that there are people who are here that may be women that feel the same way, but again, the outcomes may be different. So, and I think that's what we look at from a larger systemic perspective, because there is typically anger that we would see as a residual of a male going through some type of sexual abuse. Anger and aggression may be the default, as opposed to over sexualization may be attributed to females if they have had these lived experiences. And so I'm saying all of that to say, for you all that are watching, there is no one blueprint on what you need to look for. Like, that's the whole point. There is no one thing to look for, because for some people, they internalize it and they show no external things. For other people, they may have these acting out behaviors. They may be over sexualized. They may be, we hear people say you're being too grown. All of these things, I always say we need to be looking at the why behind the what. When we're looking at our kids and we see these acting out behaviors, we're typically looking at the behaviors, but not going further enough to ask the question, what happened to cause you to do this? What happened to you that all of a sudden you want to beat everybody up, that nobody can talk to you? Then, what happened that all of a sudden you want to be in all of these grown people's faces? Like, we got to watch people's patterns. You've got to pay attention to your kids. They change. They show you some stuff to let you know things are going on, but it's not always one thing over the other. We just got to pay attention. um Shareef, so mental health is what you do each and every day. um in your work, and I'm asking, and I guess this is a real personal question. In your work, has there ever been a moment where you're having this exchange with someone and you've gotten this transference where they're telling you their stuff and it's resonating with your stuff that you just it said you didn't do the work for? So have you had those experiences in the role of being a therapist?
the sexual abuse, but not in the way which I suffered it. That's why you said different people have different experiences. But
Hmm.
sexual abuse, no matter how you slice it, and it ain't just some guy with a dark suit on and breaking in your house and pinning you
Hmm.
down. That these are most likely people that have close access to you. My neighbor,
Hmm.
the daycare, my cousin, my friend who he was taken advantage of, you know, um, I'm sure if I would talk to him now, he knows that wouldn't be cool. I would at least like to think that. And some people fall into um, that attaboy stuff, and they take it, they take it to heart like it's a good thing. I didn't do
Hmm.
that. Gave me a puncher's chance to be back to normal because I didn't accept that. I was like, never mind. He was like, what, man? You told us. I said, yeah, but I wasn't expecting you to, to say that. But how would I expect another 12 or 13-year-old to counsel me through? They're not
Hmm.
with that, and that's how they grew up. I hope nothing happened to them, but they were, dealing with girls at a very early age, and they thought it was like something wrong with me, but I couldn't go out. So like I said, I couldn't, be having girlfriends and stuff in my teenage years, um, if I wanted to,
Hmm.
and I'm glad my mom and dad, protected me. That wasn't until, like I said, my mom and dad went through a divorce. I was around 16, 17. Then that's when I started, stepping out there a little bit. But it wasn't, but I knew it wasn't right because I always wanted to be married. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And like I said, girls my age just wasn't mature, like that. So I would try to get involved with an older woman, but just didn't work out to the point of marriage. But and eventually I did get married, and I was very happy, about that. It's and our book tells us use your wife as a garment to protect yourself. You
Mm,
know, meaning protecting you from going out in the streets,
mhm.
doing things. She's a garment to protect you. That's what we're taught in Islam. So that's how I looked at it, a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I never wanted, to be that way, but that's what I was introduced to. It seemed like it was just around me everywhere I went in my early years.
So what was the turning point? So, I because there's not this awareness when you were younger, but what was the moment? Like what was the catalyst where you had an awareness that there's something about my earlier lived experience that is impacting me in a way that I don't want to go? Let me adjust. Like what was that moment for you in
Oh,
life?
probably, like I said, getting married, which I was around 25 at
Okay.
that. And when I adored and loved Malcolm X so much, and it was a scene in the movie where he met Elijah Muhammad for the first time. He's the one that helped him out get out of jail and helped him go from a gangster to an upright individual. And he went into the room to meet Elijah Muhammad, and he was crying. He was so overwhelmed with joy. And Elijah Muhammad said, "Look, you got a clean glass of water and a glass of water that isn't clean." He said, "I want you to pick this clean glass of water." He said, "I'm so proud of you. You're not running women no more." I was like,
Mhm.
"Not taking drugs, you're not robbing people." He said, "You're going to be one of my best helpers." I said, "Well, if I'm going to call myself being like Malcolm because I adored him so much, then I got
Mhm.
to myself up,
Mm.
and I kind of just stayed away, from that kind of activity, but mostly getting married,
Mhm.
and it was
Okay.
still that kind of helped me, and but I still had that, those things that happened in my heart, in my mind. It just wasn't displaying itself
Mhm.
in a negative way, and I just kept telling myself it wasn't my fault.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, y- that affirmation that you were able to give yourself. Again, our young people don't always have that language. You've said several times to us you are much more mature than most people your age, and there are a lot of kids now who are mature, but then there are populations of kids who are not even growing in affirming soil, right? So I'm going to say it the way it is. They're not even growing in affirming soil, and then they have this traumatic experience. What is pouring into them to remind them that this is not okay and it's not their fault? And so this is where, my appeal goes out to the community while we're doing this. We've got to create spaces where we are echoing things that are correct and incorrect about this topic so that we can give kids opportunities to get from up under this trauma, because that's what this is about. Like you lived your entire life not really being able to get from up under this trauma in an intentional, direct way. And we don't want our kids in our community to continue to have to live in that type of stigma. Because here's the thing, it could be happening. It probably is happening. But even if it is happening, kids also need to know that there is life beyond this moment. And that's what you tonight are exemplifying. That yes, you can have these lived experiences that are traumatic and full of a lot of things, but yet you can still live beyond the trauma. And so that's why it's important. We do not need to continue to allow our kids to be stigmatized because of something that's happening to them.
And we
Yeah.
gotta stop hiding and protecting these Uncle Festers in our community. I
Yeah.
don't know where we get that from.
Uncle Festers. He said, stop hiding Uncle Festers in the community. I love that.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
mom's uh, daughter try to come to her and say so and so did something, and what did you do to make him do what?
Thank you for saying that. That's
Make
important. Where
mm,
we blame the victims and shame the victims. That's something that we got to stop. I absolutely agree with that. And so check yourselves, parents. If somebody tells you somebody is doing something, why don't we start with the curiosity of the truth as
mm,
opposed to the curiosity that this is a lie.
mm,
Like, let's be curious with our kids because sometimes most of the time, they are telling us. Nobody wants to make up a story about sexual assault. It is
mm,
the hardest conversation to have to tell your mother or your father, the person that you love and you care for, is doing something to me. No kid wants to do that. And no kid should have a parent that doesn't believe them.
mm. And I have a book to back up some of these statistics. It just popped in my mind. It's called The Black Woman, Battered Black and Blue, um,
Mm,
Dr. Carolyn West. And she said in her book that most, a certain percentage of youth in the black community have their first sexual experience by 8 years old. I'm proof of it. And it's usually a father, grandfather, or mom's boyfriend. There ain't no
yeah.
ghosts doing this.
Yeah.
Again, it's people got close access, and it's not your daughter's fault that you pick some kind of molester as your boyfriend, and then she violates your daughter, and you're gonna blame it on her. Like
Hmm.
really that's really sick, you know. But we got to stop protecting these people. They need to be called out.
And family, community, listen, there are ways to protect our children without further aggravating the system that they live in. And so this is what I mean because that's part of the challenge. I come to you and I want to tell you because you're my trusted adult. And I want to tell you what's happening to me, but then there's this burden of I don't want you to do anything about it. I am very clear with everybody that I meet. At the end of the day, my job is to protect you, and I'm going to do that. And if that means that I have to protect you from enemy, friend, foe, or family member, I'm gonna do that. And so I think this community of secrecy, we've got to agree to stop being secretive about things that are killing our kids. That's an adult decision. Like, that's not a decision that children should have the burden of making. Should I tell this truth or not? Adults should have the burden of I gotta do something. Like, there is no if and or. I've got to do something. That's
And
something that we've got to shoulder
there's so
if we
many.
want this to go away. People shouldn't be comfortable sleeping with kids in your house.
Mhm,
People should be comfortable telling you about their relationships with underage children. They shouldn't. Seriously.
mhm,
So, as a community, we've got to hold adults more accountable.
mhm. And I
All right,
implore,
Shareef, go ahead. We're going to get close to time, but you go
oh,
ahead. Say what
yeah,
you need to say.
women of any background, if they have been through this, seek help. It's so many women walking around with that hurt and pain that it's just eating away, at them.
Mhm.
I'll make this last point. Um, I'm not bragging or nothing, but I've been around the block a little bit. Do you know every woman that I have ever dated has told me that someone did something to them? Almost
Mhm.
every single one, including my wife at the time.
Mhm. No, I believe it. I
Yeah.
do this work just like you. So I know that this is a popular thing. And that's why we're having the conversation. We're not talking one in every thousand. We're probably talking one in every five. Like, people need to recognize that this is really happening. And, in full disclosure, I understand. I understand from personal lived experience. We had this conversation at Skill at the Plate. People have no clue the experiences that people carry that they encounter each and every day. And so, Shareef, before we go, I want to ask you, is there anything else that you want to share, you want to say to the people that are watching? Um, and also, is there any question that you would like to ask me?
Just for people don't, like I said, don't walk around with that hurt and pain. Talk to someone, and it's not your fault. It's someone out there, your church pastor, or I mean, you can talk to me. I
Mhm,
keep everything private. That's what I do. I do help adults, but I mostly counsel children. Don't walk around
mhm,
with that pain. It's going to eat away at you, and you'll never feel full if you try to get past that on your own. That's why God has blessed us with counselors and therapists. And back in the day, they
mhm,
called them sages. You know,
mhm. Yep,
biblical Quranic time sages. They were counselors.
that's
So
right.
walk around with that pain. Be aware. with your children, who they're, and you can't take anything for granted, anyone for granted.
Mhm.
Question, ask questions, and question them before your children even goes in their presence. And if they are straight up, they won't have a problem with you asking them. So
Mhm. Yep. That's
yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And so, Shareef, I've had you in the hot seat for almost an hour. Is there something that you would like to ask me?
Um, not right now. Just looking forward to you coming on my platform in May. Yeah.
Yes, that is happening. We will be in a role reversal, and I will be on Shareef show. What's that? Is that the 14th?
Yes, the 14th of May at 8 o'clock. Yep.
The 14th of May, we will be in role reversal. And let me say, Shareef, again, I am so thankful that you joined us here tonight. So this is um, childhood sexual abuse prevention month, and so I'm challenging everybody that's watching. If you don't know what the ACEs study is, you
Mm.
can Google it. There are only 10 questions. And the reason we are, soliciting you to do this for yourself is not just about the 3 questions that are about sexual abuse. There are 10 very specific questions that talk about early childhood trauma. And you would be amazed of what your score potentially is. And just for your knowledge, if you do it, a score of 3 means you've got some trauma that we really, really need to be honing in on. So, 3, if you get more than 3, you have had some severe childhood experiences that are not only impacting you in the way you function mentally, but it's statistically proven that it is also impacting how you function physically. So, when we talk about our community and we talk about hypertension, a lot of time that is that pent up trauma and stress in our body, and it's showing up in different ways. This is why we're doing this. Like, it's a very systemic thing. We have these lived experiences and they're impacting us physically, mentally, and spiritually. So it is important for you to do your work. And so this month, ask somebody. How do you ask somebody? Even if you just make them aware, listen, if you ever go through something and you don't have anybody that you think can be the holder of that truth, I'm your person. Make yourself available that somebody can come to you to have the conversation. Sometimes people just don't know who to talk to. Shareef, you told us tonight you went to your friends because that's all you had, but had somebody else giving you an opportunity, you would have done it. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experience Assessment. It's the ACEs.
Hmm. Yes.
Somebody asked me what was it called. It's called the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Kaiser Permanente did the study. It is well utilized in
I
mental health and
cried
physical health.
after they did the short test. I had some people cry. They broke down
Yes,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's telling. And so, if nothing else, if you say, "Hey, you know what? I'm dealing with some stuff, and I know I'm dealing with some stuff, and I don't know where to start," you do your ACEs, and you take your ACEs, and you go find you a good therapist, and just hand them that piece of paper, because
Yep.
that becomes the blueprint on where we need to start. So I am so thankful, Shareef, to have you here with us tonight. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for your vulnerability, your honesty, raising awareness about this topic. Like, you did not have to disclose your lived experience with us in this way, but you did. You took the mask off and you told your truth. And for that, we will forever be grateful. Thank you so much. And for all of you that are joining us, if this is your first time, I want to thank you for taking time to share this space. And if you're watching us, please know that if you are brave enough, everything that you have experienced can be utilized to help you grow. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself to be seasoned, middle age, just starting out, or in your youth. It's never too late to take your mask off and tell your truth. Thank you so much for joining us. I will see you here next month on the 4th Thursday of May. I don't know who my guest is going to be, but I'm sure I'll know in a couple of weeks. So please make sure you look out for the flyer. Everyone have a blessed day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.